Please be seated. We have just for a couple more nights. We'll have tonight and then one more. We won't quite finish tonight. And then we'll be done with the book of Ecclesiastes, which has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed this journey, but we are almost at the end. So for tonight, we're starting on Ecclesiastes chapter 11, starting in verse 9. We have made it to verse 9. So we have 9 and 10 at the end of chapter 11, and then we'll go into chapter 12 down through verse 8 tonight. And what we're looking at is sort of a, not even really a comparison, but it's this lesson on youth and old age, both of which are called Hevel, both of which are vanity, are vapor, are smoke, however you want to translate that word, Hevel. We'll see that there is some importance in how it's translated here tonight. But that's what we're talking about. We're talking about youth and age and the end of all of that being death. And so that is where we go. So, and I will say that for the most part, whenever people take, as we'll see, chapter 12 is this very... it's beautifully poetic, this description of extreme old age. And when taken on its own, it can be, it's often seen as bleak, as depressing, as, it's one of the passages that gives Ecclesiastes such a bad reputation. People come to it and they read it and think, oh man, what a downer. Who wants to read this? But when taken in its context, it really is, it's a cause for joy. Okay? You're not going to think that when we read it, but it really is there. So let's get into it so I can kind of explain what I mean as we get into this. So, but to start with, let's just look at verses 9 and 10, and then maybe verse 1 of chapter 12. So verse 9 says, "Rejoice, O young man, in thy youth, and let thy heart cheer thee in the days of thy youth, and walk in the ways of thine heart, and in the sight of thine eyes. But know thou that for all these things God will bring thee into judgment. Therefore, remove sorrow from thy heart, and put away evil from thy flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity." So the first part of the message here that he has to write about here in this section is the Hevel of youth. We're talking about the young man, and this is also why a lot of translations, when they translate the Hebrew word Hevel, they translate it into meaningless. And we kind of get a touch of that with the what I read as vanity here. When we think of vanity, we sometimes think of that something being vain is empty, is meaningless, and that's not the meaning of the word here, because as it's talking about youth, youth is vanity, and but we're told here that that we are to rejoice in the vanity of our youth, and so the word meaningless is obviously not what we're going for. Youth isn't meaningless. He's not saying this is a bad thing. There's no evil here. That it is a good thing. There is reason to rejoice even in the Hevel, the vanity of youth. So what is it talking about? What is it looking for? And again, I think the real picture of Hevel, that idea of a vapor or a smoke, something that is here for just a minute and then it's gone, something that is fleeting, that is almost intangible. That's what it's talking about. Not that it in itself is good or bad, certainly not meaningless, but we need to be aware of its nature, that it is fleeting, that it's here, and the moment you try to grab it and hold on to it, it gets away from you. And so that's what it's talking about. Now, this could be a cause for sadness or for grief, that our youth is fleeting. That could depress us if we think about it in one way. But we're told instead we should find joy in this. Because it is fleeting, we need to enjoy what we have now. It's the same message that we've seen over and over again at this point in Ecclesiastes, that the things that we have, while yes, they might be fleeting, they are vanity, they are hevel, they're here and then they're gone, but these things are a gift given to us by God. Look, flip back to chapter 5. Chapter 5, verse 19. It says, every man also to whom God has given riches and wealth and has given him power to eat thereof and to take his portion and to rejoice in his labor, this is the gift of God. For he shall not much remember the days of his life, because God answers him in the joy of his heart. So God gives us here, he says to rejoice in your labor, is what he's talking about at that point, that we have the labor that we perform. And he's talked about how labor is something we do, and then the work that we do doesn't last. If we build something, the building's going to be gone. If you clean your house, the kids are going to come through within 5 minutes, and it's a mess again, right? We do all of this work knowing that it's not going to last. And we can respond to that in two different ways, probably more, but at least two. We can let that get us down and say, well, I'm not doing this anyway, and grumble and complain about it, or we can rejoice in the work that we have to do. We can do it for the joy of doing it, enjoy what we have and the use that it's being put to, even though we know we're going to have to do it again, or we'll move on to something else. Right? Our response to that can be either one of those options, and here God instructs us to respond with joy. He's the one who gives us the work to do, and we are to find joy in that, even if it is something that's going to be fleeting, because God gives us the work. He also gives us the ability to enjoy the work. That's what it says there in 19. God's given you riches, he's given you wealth, and has given you the power to enjoy them. So all of that comes from God, but there at the end of verse 20, it says, and God answers him in the joy of his heart. So while the work that we do, or the riches that we gain, or the food that we're enjoying, while those things are fleeting, the joy that God gives us, that part is not fleeting. That's not hevel. That is building up treasures in the storehouse for eternity. That's what we're working toward. And so here again, we have, going back to our current context, we have the hevel of youth. While youth is fleeting, the joy that we find in the things that God gives us in our youth, that joy lasts us. That joy doesn't go away. That's what God gives us. And so this is the gift of God, as it says there in 5:19. So Solomon's instructions are to enjoy and rejoice in the vanity of youth. Now, he describes the vanity of youth there. Back over in chapter 11. He describes the vanity of youth by saying, thy heart cheer in the days of thy youth. You walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes. So walk in the ways of your heart. That this is part of the joy of youth, of young age. Part of the cheer of youth is the ability to follow your heart. Now, if you're like me, just hearing someone say to follow your heart just makes me cringe just a little bit, especially if you're talking to a young person, right? Because young people, I know I was one. I still act like one often enough. Young people, sometimes the things that their heart finds to do, you're going to regret that. It's just, you want to warn them against it. And what do we do with that great verse in Jeremiah 17:9? What does it tell us? The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? And yet, here is Solomon saying, rejoice in your youth, follow after the desires of your heart. How do we put those things together? Because they seem like contrary instructions. Well, we're told here the instructions for youth is to follow the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes. So we look for those things and find the pleasures that God puts in front of us, those things that God gives us to enjoy. Now, as we've looked through Ecclesiastes so far, what are the things God has given him to enjoy? The work that he has to do, the family that he has, the people that he's invested in, the things that he's built, the food and the common joys, the common graces that he has in his life, those are the things that he has to enjoy. And so as he seeks after those things, that is part of the joy of youth, is you have the energy, you have the drive, you have the expendable income, whatever it is, you are able to chase after some of those things. The chance to explore God's creation, the chance to spend time learning things that are of an interest to you. And as you get older, that gets harder. You don't have the time to go on those adventures. Learning things gets harder as you get older than it is whenever you're young. Developing your talents it's easier whenever you are a young person. It gets harder as you get older. Starting and raising a family. Those are the joys that we find that are easier when we're young, and we are to seek out those joys and follow after those things. These are things that God has given us to seek after and enjoy. Real quick, Psalm 19, starting in verse 7. Here it says, "The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true and are righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, more than fine gold, sweeter also than honey and the honeycomb." Also, Psalm 37, verse 4 says, "Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thy heart." You see, we have this mistaken idea, and well, it's a lie straight from the devil. It's all that it is. It is a lie from Satan himself, a lie that the world tries to convince us is true, that the fun part of life is found in rebellion. The fun part of life is found in sinful behavior. But what the Bible says over and over again is that joy is found in following God. Real joy is found in living by the instructions that he gives us, by following the joys that he shows us. He gives us delight in our heart because we're following on the paths that he has set, that he has shown these are the way prepared for us. We have to warn our youth and often ourselves away from the temptation of sinful activities that promises joy, that promises fulfillment and satisfaction, because those things are just lies. The Creator, the one who designed us and designed the world, filled it with all kinds of pleasures, of enjoyments, of things that we can seek after. If I went and questioned everyone here, we probably all have a different hobby of some kind, something that you enjoy that nobody else in this room finds any enjoyment in whatsoever. Now, there's probably some crossover too, but there are enough unique activities that we could do or interests that we could have that we could all have very different hobbies, things that we find joy in, that delight us. God has filled the world with joy, filled the world with adventures and with pleasures and with things that just fill up our soul. And they're all out there to discover. And when you discover, to invest in and to find those richer gems that you only get whenever you dig into something that you really enjoy. God has created the world for our pleasure in mind, with our enjoyment in mind. And so he wants us to find those things. He wants us to enjoy them. And he warns us away from the things that are damaging to us, the things that will harm us, the things that we will look back on and say, I wish I never got anywhere near that because it just did so much damage down the road. Those are the things God warns us against. And so we're told that we can follow our heart, we can go for the things that we see, especially in our youth, whenever we're able to do more of that. We seek after the joys that God puts in front of us and fill our times with those things. While we have our youth, we seek after those things. But it also comes with the warning, and we have it right there in Ecclesiastes verse 9, that youth is certainly not an excuse for sin. There in verse 9, it says, walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of thy eyes, but know thou that for all these things God will bring thee into judgment. So there's that warning there attached to it. Yes, go out into the world, seek for joy, find the things that you love, spend the days of your youth, filling them up with the joy that God puts in front of you. Absolutely, all of those things. But remember that there are boundaries there, that sin is still sin, and boys will be boys is not an excuse that will stand up before God. That we call sin, sin, and there is enough, more than enough joy for us to explore without falling off into those things that God warns us. Those are not joys for us. Those ways lead to destruction. God's trying to keep us on within the bounds, within the true, lasting joy. And so we're told to stay away from those things. And there in verse 10, it says, and therefore, by doing that, therefore you remove sorrow from thy heart, and you put away evil from thy flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity. So by staying within the bounds that God gives us, by going in the direction that he sets, these things are for your joy, those things are destruction, stay on these things. If we'll do that, then we save ourselves from the sorrow and pain that come with those other things. And everyone here, because we are all sinners and we have all been there, we know from experience what those sorrows and pains are that come with falling off into that sinful behavior, falling off into those things, spending our youth on things that are not beneficial for us, things that aren't true joy, that have brought us sorrow, that have brought us pain. And we look at those things and say, I wish I'd never gone there. I wish I'd spent that time in this area where true joy could have been found. And so our responsibility then, however old we are, is to look at those who are younger than us, who have more youth than we have, and try to impart that knowledge to them, to guide them with that wisdom, to say, you don't want to get into that. That is sorrow and pain. Seek after these joys. These are the joys that'll last. These are the things that'll really build your heart, that you'll look back on. You know, there's nobody, I have never heard a single case of somebody who gave their life to God at a young age, and then when they were older, they looked back and said, you know, I wish I'd spent a little bit more time living for myself. I wish I'd spent just a few more years living in sin before I came to God. Nobody ever says that. But there are whole hosts of people who said, I wish I'd found God sooner. I wish those years that I spent in that sin, I wish I could have given that to God. I wish I could have spent that time doing something real, something that lasts. It's every time. That's the way it goes, because those things are just the lies of Satan. It's sorrow and it's pain. We have to devote our youth to the vanities that God blesses. It's all vanity, right? That's sort of the theme through the book. It's all vanity. It's all fleeting, unless it is the joy that God gives us is there, that God is involved, and then there's something that lasts. But the activities, they're all vanity. And so we see young people doing things that we just kind of shake our head at. Say, what is the point of that? Well, is there joy there? Is there something there that God can bless, even if it seems ridiculous to us old farts? You know, we look at that and say, what's the point in that? Is there joy there? Is there sin there? Is it free from sin and free from rebellion? And is God blessing that? Can he use that? Enjoy the days of your youth. Encourage that. Let them fill their time with joy, even if it's vanity. It's here and then it's gone. But the joy that God gives us, even in those silly things. You know, us older folks, we have our silly things that we enjoy too, right? And young people look at it and say, now that's vanity, right? There is no point in that. But there's joy there, and that's what God blesses. That is the gift of God. So, okay, moving on. The end of verse 10, I will share this, where it says, for childhood and youth are vanity. Literally, the word youth there, we have childhood and youth. The word youth is literally translated black hair. So your childhood and your black hair, it's going away. It's all turning gray. So anyway, I found that funny. But that's the literal translation there. Youth and black hair are vanity. They are here and then they're gone. Okay, but then we get into chapter 12, and that's where things take a turn. That's where things shift. So let's read down through, we'll start in 12:1 through verse 8. It says, remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. While the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened, or the clouds return after the rain, in the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders cease, because they are few. Those that look out of the windows be darkened, and the doors shall be shut in the streets, when the sound of the grinders is low, and he shall rise up at the voice of the bird, and all the daughters of music shall be brought low. Also when they shall be afraid of that which is high, and fear shall be in the way, and the almond tree shall flourish, and the grasshopper shall be a burden, and desire shall fail, because man goes to his long home, and the mourners go about in the streets. Well, let's just stop there for now. So here's the beginning of that, what seems a much more bleak picture. And here he's talking again about extreme old age and how the body starts to fail. If you catch the dual meaning there, all of this is talking about the parts of the body as they fail, and some of them are pretty obvious as you go through. So the keepers of the house that tremble, those are shaking hands. As we get older, our hands start to shake. The keeper of the house. Let's see, the strong men that bow themselves. I think there's some disagreement, but I think this is talking about the legs, how they don't quite straighten and hold themselves like they used to. It talks about the grinders shall cease because they're few. Anyone want to make a guess on what the grinders are? Yeah, those are our teeth. They're fewer than they used to be, and they don't work quite as well as they used to. Let's see, those who look out of the windows are darkened. Our eyes, they get weaker. They start to get dim. Let's see, the doors be shut in the streets when the sound of the grinding is low. Again, some disagreement there. It talks about when the sound of grinding gets low, that he shall rise up at the voice of a bird, but the daughters of music shall be brought low. I think all of that together is talking about the ears. Some people say there's a couple other things there, but I think, you can't hear the music like you used to. You have to turn up the TV a lot higher, and yet still in the morning, all it takes is one bird and you're awake. You can't go back to sleep, right? So that's what's going on there. Verse 5, there be afraid of that which is high, and fear shall be in the way. So you're not climbing up ladders anymore, and you're afraid of traveling. You don't want to get out, or when you do get out, you're driving 35 miles an hour on the highway. You're a little afraid of getting out and going. So all of those things, it keeps going. The almond tree shall flourish. From what I could tell, almond trees bloom white. And so that's the hair turning gray, or turning white. That seems to be what that's talking about. And a grasshopper is a burden. You can barely even pick up a grasshopper anymore. So all of these, they're all pictures of the body that's just failing, right? But now notice what it says. And you can understand why someone reading this will say, well, gee, that's I don't want to read this book anymore. Let's go back. Let's find something else. But before we think too much about that, notice For one thing, Solomon doesn't give an age limit to youth, right? He doesn't say those who are in their youth until you turn 50 and then you're in this category. There's not an age limit. There's not a cutoff age there that he gives. What he says in verse 1 of chapter 12, he says that while the evil days come not. Now, the evil days are talking about these days when it says, the years draw nigh, and thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. All right, so the evil days are when you say, there is no more pleasure left in life. And he says about that days that then you can't see, your eyes don't work, your teeth don't work, your ears don't work, your legs don't bend, you can't move. Now, some of you might say, well, I feel some of that. But I don't think anyone here will say, yep, that's me, right? That's down to a T. I can't see, I can't walk, I can't. No, we all, it's more of a spectrum here, okay? While you might not have all of the spunk and vigor you had whenever you were in your 20s or 30s, you also are not yet at the end of the road. If you can say, there is still pleasure to be found in my life, I am not yet that far gone, then you have enough youth left to be getting on with, okay? You have enough youth left for him to say, don't waste it, okay? Don't let it, it's still fleeting. What you have is still fleeting. And so unless this describes you to a T and you say there's no pleasure in life, I'm done, get me out of here. Until you're there, then God has given you what youth you have. And so because of that, we should look at it and find the joy in life, whatever those pleasures are. And just as those in the young days that we were just talking about, those in their youth, we say they are just living life to enjoy those vanities. We all are. We really, every one of us, that's what we're doing. If you consider the things that he has talked about as being vanities here in Ecclesiastes, it's been everything. He spent this whole time exploring, well, I'll try this and I will work hard and gain a bunch of money. Well, that's vanity. I'll try this and I'll have build relationships. And no, that's vanity. I'll try this and I'll learn all I can and be the wisest man in the world. Well, that's vanity too. Everything in life is vanity. And so that takes us back to chapter 5, the end of chapter 5. It's all vanity, but these are vanities that God has given you, and he's given you to enjoy. So what do you fill your time with during the day? What do you find pleasure in? Is it going to work, getting some work done during the day? Is it enjoying time with your family? Is it a good book that you like to read, a Bible study that you found you love? Is it afternoon naps? Whatever it is that God has put in your life, he gave it to you. Wherever you find joy, wherever you spend your time, God gave it to you. And if you remember some of the other parts of Ecclesiastes, even the things that we don't enjoy, even the things that we don't particularly like, God gave them to us, and he gave them to us for our good. Okay? So find pleasure in it. Find the joy in it. Even the hard things, find the joy in it. Because as long as we are able to get out and go, as long as we're able to open our eyes and keep our grinders moving, we at least have good food to enjoy, right? Find the pleasures that God has given us. He gave us those things, even if they're fleeting. He gave us those things, and he gave them to us for our joy. He wants us to enjoy those things. And as we enjoy those things, we say, God, thank you for this. And as we enjoy those things, we live a life that's pleasing to him. That's what he's called us to. That's what he's given us. And so that's what he's saying. It's not meant to say you're closer to this picture of age than you are to your days of your youth, that you're 1 foot in the grave, so you might as well give up now. It's not what he's saying. He paints this extreme picture of old age for us to read that and say, whew, glad I'm not there yet. You know, it might be a year or two down the road, but I'm not there yet. And so I still have a little bit of youth to enjoy. Okay? That's why he paints this picture. It's the the hevel of youth and the hevel of old age, the vanity, both are vanity. Both of them are fleeting. So enjoy what God's given you. That's the picture here. But he doesn't stop there. He keeps going, in case that wasn't bleak enough. So there at the end of verse 5, we had, the grasshopper shall be a burden. It says, desire shall fail, and because man goes to his long home, and the mourners go out in the streets. Or ever the silver cord be loosed, or the golden bowl be broken, or the pitcher be broken at the fountain, or the wheel be broken at the cistern. Then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto the God who gave it. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, all is vanity. So we have finally arrived, right? It went downhill, and now we're dead. This is the end of the road. He's there, the end of verse 5. Man goes to his long home. He's died, he's gone on. The mourners are out in the streets. This is a picture of a funeral. There in verse 6, people have all kinds of ideas of what those verses mean. So the silver cord that is loosed, the golden bowl that is broken, the pitcher that's broken at the fountain, and the wheel broken at the cistern. All kinds of ideas of what that might mean. It's very poetic, obviously, and so the meaning is a little vague. I think that the cord loosed and the bowl broken are a couplet there, so both meaning the same thing, talking about the body that is broken and has given up. And then the second half is another couplet, the pitcher at the fountain and the wheel broken at the cistern. Both have to do with the water, flowing water, which is often a picture of life or spirit. And so the body is broken and there's no more life filling it. There's no new life coming in. So both a picture of death, however you want to take it. It's all a picture of the end of the road. We have death. And then there at verse 7, now that we are good and dead, dust returns to the earth, and the spirit, what happens to it? It goes to God. Oh, wait a minute. Well, that's not so bad after all, is it? I thought this was the sad ending of all of this sad book. No, wait a minute. This isn't a sad ending. This old broken body that we just talked about being in such pitiful shape anyway, it goes to dust, as well it should. Just good riddance, right? Be done with this body. And our spirit, we're with God. This is not a sad ending to this story. This is a joyful ending to this story. And he tells us that whenever he says, vanity of vanity, saith the preacher, all is vanity. Remember, this does not mean meaningless. This means fleeting, okay? This means it's here and then it's gone. And what better could be said about death than that it's here and then it's gone? Who else but someone who has a strong faith in God can say, oh, yeah, death is coming, but it's here and then it's gone. You know, it's fleeting. We're just going on past it. It's just another bump in the road. That is not a sad ending to the story. And he says this is the vanity of all vanities. This is a superlative in Hebrew, like we have the Holy of Holies in the temple. You have the holy place, and then you have the Holy of Holies, right? This is the most holy is the idea. Well, here you have vanity of vanities. You have all of these vanities, but then death is the vanity of all vanities, right? It is the most fleeting. It is the most hevel of all of these things that we looked at, because it's here and then it's gone. And you could look at that and say, well, it is the vanity of vanities because all of that work has been undone. All of it is past. Everything we've built up is... Or if you, like Solomon, like the person writing here, says, I die and my spirit goes to God, then what this means is all of that work that I have put into, all of that treasure that I have laid up, all of my investment that I have put for eternity, we get death out of the way and we get to step into all of that. And it is joy forevermore, right? The last of the vanities that we do away with, that we get through, is this silly thing called death that God's already beaten. We just have to get through it, right? And so Ecclesiastes, it gets a bad rap, I know, but it is not meant to be a depressing book. That's not why he wrote it. Unless you can only associate with the part of Solomon while he was going through all of these hardships, and you can't connect with his relationship to God, with the joy that he found in those things, then that would be sad, right? Because there is no hope in that. There's no joy in that. But for the Christian, for the believer, the book of Solomon is about joy. Joy in difficult times, sure. Joy in a world that has ups and downs, highs and lows, good and bad. Yes, absolutely. Joy in a world that is fleeting and you work hard and then it's gone. Yes, but there's joy. There's true joy, joy that lasts and joy that's real. Right? So much of the joy and the happiness and the pleasure offered by this world, it's so shallow and so fake. And there's no real meat to it. But the joy that God gives is real joy. And it can last through all of these highs and lows. And it lasts even beyond the vanity of all vanities, which is death. It lasts even beyond that. So that's the joy that Solomon's talking about here. That's what he's encouraging us with all of his prods and goads to find true joy. Not just the fleeting pleasures, not just sinful or destructive pleasures, but the joy that God's given us. Right? Any thoughts or anything that you guys want to share here? Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's very good. And that's it. That's someone who has realized that while all of this is fleeting, there's joy, those things that you hold on to. Absolutely. That's right. That's right. That is reality. And that's what we like about Ecclesiastes is he doesn't shy away from that. It's not something we have to avoid. The truth of that, especially as Christians, we can embrace that more than anyone else can. Anyone else? All right. Well, let's have one last word of prayer, and then we will be dismissed for the evening. Yeah. Uh-huh. All right, let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you. God, thank you for the joys that you have brought into our life. God, help us to live with eyes and hearts open to all of the joys that you have set before us, all of your blessings, everything that we have, God, we know comes from you. Help us to see it for what it is, to not get bogged down in worries or stresses, and to recognize that you have given us so much that we can take joy in, that we can delight in who you are. We can delight in your word. We can delight in the family and the friends that you've given us and so many other things. God, help us to seek you in all that we do. God, we thank you and we love you. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.